Hello. And our recording today is going to be on opening a closed mind, whether it is yours or whether it's someone else's. Um, I find that something that I need to always scrutinize. We're always thinking, always, always. And sometimes we need to monitor our thoughts and really look at what am I thinking? I'm pulling up the opening and close. So I always like to look at it, not just looking at the fact that I'm giving information to you, because I always want to take that. I think everybody that we work with, interact with, we have this, we see what we want to see. And so there are some times that we may be critical towards something else. And there's times that it is critical that we think critically, meaning that we really look at what our thoughts are and how much reality is to them or not. Before we begin to, declare anything to be an absolute, that we self-evaluate our own perceptions and our own attitudes regarding any particular situation. Because I know I personally want to learn to hold my convictions loosely so that in case I'm proven wrong, it's not that big heavy weight. And I'm okay to be able to see what is true. So it's looking at the fact of what is more important, our opinion or the actual truth, because sometimes our opinions can hide truth. And then what is more helpful, to be dogmatic or to be relatable, to be open to hear what the other person has to say. And then what is more liberating, to be prejudiced or to live in freedom. That maybe so, maybe no. I know in working with the prisoners a long times, they would come up and say things to me, and I said, well, maybe so, maybe no. I'm not going to argue with you about anything. So looking here is, how does one have a closed mind, or how does one's mind become closed? So it has a tendency to become closed whenever, the thing of it is that every day we make decisions, whether we are cognizant of them or not, we make decisions. And once a decision has been made, if we think that it has served us well, we have a tendency to store it in our brain so that we can use it again and again, often without stopping to consider if it's working for us or not. Maybe it worked one time or two or three times, but then it kind of gets out of balance. So once these thoughts are formed, there kind of comes something in that there's no room for more information. And so we've already completed it, rather than looking at the fact that there may be other things to consider. So those ways are that our mind becomes closed is whenever we're just not listening to hear anymore, or to consider anymore, or to consider the fact that maybe we have misunderstood something. So how can one's mind be open? Well, we do that by making choices. We always, always, always have choices. And to look at those choices and to challenge our beliefs, to challenge what we are thinking as to whether or not it is viable. And then to willingly look at all sides for what needs to be considered, because it's not usually just this side or that side. There's hundreds of, or at least multitudes, or at least several little small things in there that's working together. So what is the doorway to communication? Do we want to open it or just have a little bitty peek? Or we have a tendency to, we look in the mirror to see if there's what can be, if you have something on your, if someone were to say, well, you have something on your mouth, you may go like this and then ask, did I get it off? But we want to always be open to looking deeper, if nothing else, to looking into the mirror that we can look into to see ourselves if it has been erased from whatever was on our mouth. So our attitudes create a doorway. It creates a doorway to you, as well as it creates a doorway away from you. It depends on how we handle that doorway. Our behaviors, if the person that we're with equates the behavior that we was anticipating, then likely our door to them is open. But if that interaction with that oncoming person, the one that we're discussing with, is against our needed or our upfront specifications, then the door may be closed, it may be partially closed, it may be all the way closed, or it may be locked and bolted. And all of that can go along with our attitude. That whenever we recognize another's behavioral style, we can adjust our style to open communication, to some win-win relating. If they start yelling at us or something, we can say, well, what, hold on here. I'm not quite understanding. So let's slow it down a little bit so I can really understand what you're saying to me. And then also that communicating with each other puts in less tension. So we always want to choose our battles. It takes two to argue and to keep the strife going. So we do not have to acknowledge every comment, every action, every attitude. I like what Ann Landers used to say, that just because a donkey brays does not mean that you have to engage in the conversation. So just because there is that, we want to overlook, not ignore, because ignoring puts up its own defensiveness. We want to overlook as much bad behavior or miscommunication as possible while acknowledging the positives and asking for, I'm sorry, I didn't understand all that. Would you give me some more information? And then two, to open our mind, we want to have some compassion, because the people that we interact with and interacts with us, we act out of our pain, our hurts, our fears, our frustrations, and often out of our rejections, even if we don't speak them in the conversation. And we always want to be a team player, to engage with a positive attitude, that even if we mess up, we're all on the same team. So let's see what we can do. So I have just some 8 suggestions here. One is to, in that area of conflict, we always want to respond rather than react to. And that responding means taming our emotions. It means listening to the critiquing seriously without taking it personally. It is a part of knowing our own strengths and our own limitations and where that frustration point is. To set some healthy boundaries, to set some healthy limits, to set some healthy conditions. To use fair judgment of yourself and also of others, whether it's one or two or many. And to ask questions rather than just tell, and definitely not to just boldly accuse or excuse. Just be having more questions, as to what we can ask or say. And we want to go for dialogue, not a debate. And even if you're just discussing this with yourself, you want to discuss rather than argue with you, as yeah, but I thought. Mm-hmm. And then to that dialoguing with self as well as with others leads to, or it invites us to understand. As we ask someone, would you break that down a little? Would you tell me more what you're talking about, what you're meaning? If we get into a debate, it leads to trying to convince the other of our position. And we're wanting to have an open communication here. And we want to make room for both speaking and listening. That, to sit back and I want to hear what you have to say, but then also I need you to hear what I have to say. Point number 3 is that we differentiate between what we want to acknowledge and what we want to let slide. I mean, there may be some very, very points that we want to get across and be real dogmatic about it, but maybe sometimes we need to not make a big issue out of every comment. and to not search for these hidden agendas as to what might they be thinking, what might they be coming up with, what might be their agenda, rather than just listening and allowing them to expose and to be truthful. To overlook some flaws in the person that we have pronounced as being quite difficult. If we could begin to, it really depends in looking at lead management. It is in leading someone rather than automatically determining where they're coming from. And then always be objective. To hear the comments through your value filters. And we have all kinds of filters in our behavior card. But as we look at these filters of what we do know and what we don't know, or what we're thinking, as we go through those filters, as we will hear the comments through them, we may can hear something that we may not have heard before. And again, about taking things personally, listen to the other person's opinion. That's what they're telling you, the way they see things, the way they understand things, rather than taking it as being an offense to you. And then in speaking back, we want to be objective, and we want to lower our emotions, to speak without anger, to speak with, and to notice the likelihood, the expressions on our face, to have no hidden agendas, to be open, honest, and forthright, and to be firm yet kind. As we are firm yet kind, firmness shows that respect for you, that here's a boundary and no, you're not crossing it. Kindness shows respect to the one that we're setting the boundary for. And then always, always develop an open mind and have a tender heart. So we want to state the facts as we know them. Use wisdom in making your point. And truth is truth, regardless of any counterattacks. If it is true, it is true. It may not, we may not have gotten to that truth yet. It may still be something that is yet to be more discussed and understood and seen and walked around and looked at. And a lie is a lie, regardless of the defenses that we may give to it, or the yeah buts. And so that realizing, have you ever given in to what someone says just to get them to shut up? Well, a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. They're going to still thinking that this is the truth and I've discovered it and you need to discover it too. Or they're going to hold on to that conviction that you're just lying or blah, blah, blah. So it is using wisdom in making your point. And also in using the verbally to adjust our vision as to what we are seeing. That binoculars can either multiply or they can diminish, and it depends on which end we use. And the same thing is true with us. It depends on whether or not we are looking only at the way we say things, which should be the way every other person does, or if we are willing to look at how the other person is seeing what is going on. And the problem more often is the way it is being seen. As in, the problem is not necessarily the problem as a whole. The problem is the way we see the problem. And so we need to look at reality of our thoughts and our beliefs. What am I really thinking? What do I really believe about the situation, about myself, about this other individual? And see the issue as a learning experience. What can I learn from this confrontation without making it a confrontation? And then always, always to choose our attitude. And let choices be our friend in choosing our attitude. To focus on the real problem, not the imaginary one, and also to focus on what the person is telling us as opposed to their personality. I mean, you may not like them, but let's work together here. That difficult people are opportunities for self-improvement. That rather than thinking about what we dislike about them, think about how do I at times mirror what they are presenting, and how can I use their demeanor and their actions to be at self-improvement as far as my interacting with anyone. And then disagree without being disagreeable, as in, well, walk softly and speak kindly. Acknowledge an impasse while continuing to hold the person in high regard. You know, that we can be at a point here where maybe we need to just put this on hold for another discussion, but we always want to keep the other person in high regard. And then sometimes diffusing the issue, to empathize, to distinguish between what we are feeling and what we are thinking. And also, as we're hearing what the others are saying, to help distinguish between what they are really thinking and what they are feeling. Are they giving us their emotions, or are they giving us their thoughts? Sometimes they don't always match. And then determine the attitude you project in any kind of conflict, as to whether or not it is extremely off-putting or just off-putting. Your position is not relevant to the customer, the coworker, or the boss, but it is to you. So we always need to be willing to understand what their position is and what is relevant to them. And then when you keep an open, welcoming attitude, the door is always open, or it has more of an opportunity of being open for continuing dialogue. And so here's just some thoughts that can be included in asking questions or making comments. You know, what do you think? I don't quite see where you're coming from. You know, look at it in inches rather than in miles. Could you explain that? How did you arrive at that conclusion? And then, I cannot respond to that right now. I need more information. And then one that I use quite frequently down here at the bottom, whenever there are times that I really want to speak something out, that because of history with the situation, sometimes I say, well, I'd rather not speak because it might offend you. And I find that people say, no, it won't. It absolutely will not. But we still need to always tread carefully. So be willing to let them know what you like, what you don't like, what you need, what I need you to rephrase that. I need you to explain that more in depth to me, as I'm not understanding it. And then maybe sometimes I need you to stop something and let you know what you feel or what you choose to, or going with a no thanks. Well, thank you very much for being here. And I trust this gave some thoughts, and many blessings. And